Hello, hello. Let's wait for people to start the live. Hello. Okay, guys. So today we're gonna do Mario. Mario is a problem from the Harvard course CS50. So it's pretty cool because it helps you practice programming for loops, nested for loops, which a lot of people have some difficulty on. So there are two steps. The first step is we're gonna try to print this pattern here. And then there is another step, which is the harder version. So basically the harder version is we're gonna try to create both sides of the pyramid. We'll try to do that in C and in Python, so you get exposed to different programming languages. So without further ado, let's take a look at Mario. So let's start with the easier version, the version where we just have the left-hand side. So let's take a look at that. So if you wanna follow, you can just Google CS50 Mario, and then you have access to the problem statement. But basically what we want is this. So let's take a step-by-step approach to this problem. I'll be using CS50 IDE, so you can just Google CS50 IDE. And that's the online development environment from the Harvard course. So then you can write Python, CS50, you don't have to use your local IDE. So let's wait for that to get started. It usually takes some time. But yeah, so basically we'll be using a for loop, but let's do this step by step. One problem I see with the students is that they try to do everything at once. Uh, Always try to do step by step. The key is to do step by step. So and another thing I want you guys to think is, how are the patterns increasing? So at the beginning, it's going super slow. So at the beginning, in the first row, I have one hash. Second row, two hashes. Third row, three hashes. Fourth row, four hashes. Fifth row. So the number of hashes I print per row depends on which row I'm at. Now let's think in terms of space. I have in the last row, 0 spaces. In the second last, 1 space. In the no in the third last, 3 spaces. So it's inversely proportional. So at the beginning I have 7 spaces, then 6. So as the number of row increases, the number of spaces decreases. So that's something interesting. I think the server for CS50 ID is super slow. If that doesn't work, we'll try on the VS Code. So as the number of rows increases, the number of spaces decreases. As the number of row increases, the number of hashes increases. So this is a very important pattern for us to understand. Okay, so that's it. So we'll have, what's the strategy here? We're gonna first print the spaces, then print the hash. Then we're gonna go to the next line. We're gonna print the spaces, print the hashes, go to the next line. So we'll do that over and over again. Since my CS50 ID is taking a long time to solve, let's do it on VS Code. So let me close this project. Let me see, close folder. And then let's start a new project. Okay. So basically what we want is we're going to ask the user for some input. So let me make this larger. We're going to say how rows. How many rows do you want? So in Python, we'll do in Python first. We use input. So input will ask the user for information. So how many rows? Okay, and then question mark. Let's save this. So this will be Python mario.py. Let's save this. Okay, let's create a terminal so we can run this. So we go here, terminal, new terminal. Okay, so let's run this and see if it's working. So I like to do step by step. So let's first see if this is working. What we're gonna do is write Python 3, so that's basically running the program. Python 3 Mario.py. Let me see if we're at the right spot. No. So now that we are at the right spot, Python 3 Mario.py. So how many rows? 5, and it gives me back 5. So far, so good. We want this to be an int, though, because we're going to use this in the for loop. So we're going to cast the input to an integer. Okay? We're going to cast this to an integer. And then let's first do a for loop, just to play around. So for rows, for row, no, for I in range rows, print hello. So that should print, if my input is 5, it should print 5 hellos. Let's see if this works. So Python 3, Mario.py, how many rows? Hello, hello, hello. So 5 hellos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5. Okay? So for those who just came back, we're using the, I'm going to put this on the chat. So on the chat, you have the problem statement in case you guys want to follow. So this is the Mario problem. So we're trying to do this shape here using for loops. Okay? So let's go on. So the pattern I want is actually a hash. So let's just print hashes first. We're going to just print hashes. So how many rows? 3. So it should print 3 hashes. 1 hash, 2 hashes, 3 hashes. So we're getting closer to the problem, right? Because basically we want to print like whatever the input of the user is, we're going to print that pattern. The thing is, it's variable. So in the first row, I print 1 hash. In the second row, 2 hashes. In the third row, 3 hashes, so on and so forth. So within each row, I have a variable number of columns. And how many columns do I have? It depends on the row. So in the first row, 1 column. In the second row, 2 columns. In the third row, 3 columns. So I'll have another for loop. And how many times will I loop through? Will I have this? What will determine the number of hashes? The current row, right? So if my first row is 1, I'll print 1 hash, 2 hashes. So let's make a small modification because we want to start at 1. When we don't have anything here, it starts at 0. So when I put a 1 here, I'm basically saying, hey, I'll start at 1. So my I will first be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And then here I'm going to print from 1 to I. So what's that doing is basically it's saying, hey, I'm at row 1, so print me 1 hash. I'm at row 2, so print me 2 hashes. I'm at row. So now we'll have kind of that shape we're looking for. So let's run the code. And if I say 4 rows, for example, it didn't work. Let me see why. 5 rows for I range. Let me save. Let's see what's going on. How many rows? So for some reason, for rows. Okay, what's going on? Let me try 1. Oh yeah, rows plus 1, because I'm going 1 more than. Okay, so now it's printing 3 rows, but it's not printing here. This is not working because I think I need I plus 1. So let's take a look. How many rows? 3. Okay, yeah, I know why. So basically the print, if you come from other programming languages, the print skips to the next line. So we don't want to skip to the next line. So we do end. So that means we print the hash, and we stay on the same line, okay? And then when we're done with that row, oops, what's going on? When we're done with that call, with that row, then we go to the next line. So we do print. So now this will print all in the same row, and this will go to the next line. So now it's gonna work. 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, and let's try with other patterns. So 5. So now the shape we're looking for is working, but it's missing the spaces. It's missing the spaces. So we want now to print the spaces. So what will control the number of spaces we have? So we know we need to print the spaces before the hash. So that will be here because we're printing the hashes here. So we need the spaces somewhere here. How many spaces? I mean, not necessarily inside of this loop, but before the hash. So it will be here. Let's put it here. How many spaces do I print? I'll print for space in range. Row I. Rows minus I. So why rows minus I? Let's think about it. Not one I. Let's try to understand. If you look at this line, if you guys look at this line, we have 7. So in total, there are 8 rows. We have 7 spaces here. Then 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So basically, I have the number of total rows, 8, minus the current row I'm at. So I have 8 rows minus the current 7. 8 rows minus the current one, 6. So that's the formula. That's what's going to determine how many spaces I print in a specific row. So then I just print spaces. And then since I don't want to skip to the next same line, I put n like that. Okay, so let's see if this works. 3. Yes, so the shape works. So basically, 5. So now we have that shape we wanted, right? The pyramid. So this is controlling the number of spaces. This is controlling the number of hashes. The end makes sure we don't go to the next line. So we'll print them side by side. This print will go to the next line. So let's see if there is anything, someone on the chat, any questions so far? If you guys have any questions regarding what we have, you can put on the chat. And so if no questions, I'll just go on. Awesome. So now what we're going to do is do the right-hand side of the problem. So let's go to the right-hand side. So problem set 1, which is very similar to what we have. So the right-hand side is basically the left-hand side without the spaces before. Without the spaces before. So we print 2 spaces and then print the hashes. So let's do that. So after I print the hashes, I'll just print 2 spaces. So I can say print 2 spaces, print 2 spaces. And then I can just copy and paste this, basically. We'll see a smarter way of doing this, but you see that this is as easy as doing this, because basically I'm printing, let me just change the variable to k. K, yes. So it doesn't really matter here. We can do like that because we're not using the variable for anything. So I'll just do this. This actually is more helpful. So what this is saying is I don't care how many times I'm looping. I'm just looking. Okay, let's run this. So 5 rows, and it didn't work. So why it didn't work? Let's see. So we print 2. Because I did the print 2 spaces and went to the next line. We need to do the end. Same thing. So otherwise, it's going to print and go to the next line. So now let's do 4, 5, and now the shape works. The shape we're looking for works. So let's see if we have 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. However, this code looks pretty cluttered. It's hard to understand what's going on. So now we'll use functions which make your code look much cleaner. So what I want is a function called def print hashes that takes in a num and print how many hashes I want. So it takes a parameter for I in range 1 to num. And then it prints hashes like this. So now that we have a function called print hashes, we can just call it whenever we print hashes. So, and pass the parameter here. So I plus 1. So we'll call this. So this makes your code much more clean. Instead of just doing all the work in this for loop, you can call a function. So I can delete. And also I was repeating myself. The same for loop was here and up here. Now I can just call the function. I print the hashes, I print two spaces, and then I print the hashes again. So let me print the hashes. This will be I plus 1 as well. So let's see if this still works. It should work. So I took all the code that was inside of this for loop and put in the function. So my code is more readable. So how many rows? 5. Let me see. Yeah, because I didn't put the end. So don't forget the end. In Python, it goes straight down. So let me go 4, 5. So now it's still working. So now let's create a function to print spaces. It will be very similar to my print hashes actually, but let's call it print spaces. Print spaces. It goes from 1 to num. It prints a space, and we're gonna call it here. So we're gonna call print spaces with rows minus 1. Minus I, sorry. So basically the total number of rows minus my current row. So this should still work. How many rows? 5. It messed up, so let me see what I'm doing wrong. Num rows minus I. Let me see. So it's off by 1, the number of spaces. Basically, I think I need to do rows minus I. Let me replace this like that. It's off by 1. So 5, yes. So now it's working. So it's always good to like test and see what's going on. So now look at how cleaner my code looks. So now I'll create a function. This is kind of not necessary, but I think it makes the code more readable. Print double spaces. So it takes also, this won't take any parameter, and we'll just print, we'll just call this, because then I can just read my for loop and understand what's going on. So print double spaces. Let's test it. So whenever you make changes to your code, test it, because maybe you make a mistake. So it's still working fine. And finally, go print next line. So next line. Also not necessary, but you see what I mean. So we just print. So then we call this next line. And how many rows? 5, and it's still working. So now my for loop looks much cleaner. However, I think it's a bad name. So I'll call this current row to make it more meaningful. So rows minus current rows, current row, because it's really the current row, right? That's really what I signifies. Current row. And now I'm gonna replace rows by num rows. So it also has a more meaningful name. So num rows, num rows, num rows, num rows, num rows. Okay, so to finish this up, I'll create a main function. So if you come from C, if you did the C problems, it's always good to have a main function that it's kind of a menu of what the problem is about. So someone who's not familiar with coding, they can just take a look at this. They just take a look at my main and understand what's going on. So basically, you ask the user for the number of rows. Actually, let's put number of rows inside of main. So what he's doing is he's getting the number of rows, looping, going for each row, and for each row you print spaces, you print hashes, you print double spaces, you print hashes, and next line. So even if you don't understand code, you can understand this because it's very readable. So see how my design now is much better than I had before. So let me run this 5, and I still have the same problem. So let me zoom out so you guys can see the whole problem. So I call main. Main is like the menu of the function. I ask for the number of rows. For each row, I'm going to print spaces. So the number of spaces depend on, the formula is num rows minus current row. I print the hashes, print double spaces, print. So even if you don't understand code, you can kind of figure out by looking at main what's the purpose of my program. That's a sign of a good design. So let's see if anyone has any questions. I'm using Python flux capacitor, so I can do in C if you're interested. So I can use now this time to code in C. The code will look very similar, but for those who are trying to learn C, I can do in C pretty quickly. So are you guys, send on the chat if you want to see the same implementation on a different programming language. The CS50 ID is working here, so yeah, so I can use that. So if there is no one on the chat who wants to sing C, I'll just post in Python. Let's see. No one? Okay. So basically that was it, guys. So this was like the Mario implementation. I'll send here on the chat. There is another part of the code. Let me, oh, I already sent on the chat. There is another part of the code which is basically dealing with like negative values, 42. So for that, you just do a do while, right? So you keep asking the user. So actually, let's do it now. So a do while in Python looks like this. So while true, so this is like an infinite loop. While true, you get the number of rows. So if none rows, so we want the value according to the problem statement to be greater than 0 and less than 8. So less or equal, greater or equal. We print, we break from the loop. Otherwise, we keep on doing the same thing. So now let's see if this works. So basically, it won't work for negative values. So for example, if I put -1, it will keep asking me. 42, it will keep asking me. If it's within the range of 0 and 8, it's gonna print the pattern. Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed the live. I'll do this every week on Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And see you guys next week. Any suggestions you can send on the chat or on my YouTube channel as a comment. I always read it every Wednesday. So if you want to see solutions, more solutions for CS50 problem sets, or for a question you have, or any programming problem, I'll be here. Okay? See you guys next week.